Today I'm going to be taking a look at a 13-year-old gaming computer. Now I picked this system up secondhand for just $10 and it included everything except for the hard drive. Looking at the inside, it's pretty dusty and the cable management isn't the best I've seen, but let's be fair, this machine has been around for almost 15 years now. Both the CPU and GPU were released back in 2012, and I'll show the full specs in just a moment. Something I thought would have been a limitation of this system is the single 8GB stick of DDR3, however, running in single channel didn't really affect the testing too much, as you'll see in just a moment. We've got an Intel i5-3470, that 8GB stick of DDR3, and a Radeon HD 7870 2GB. It's pretty significant that we have a 2GB card in the system because back in the day this was considered higher end, being 2GB. Of course now we've got things like the 4090 and all that with 20 plus gigabytes of VRAM, but this 2GB HD 7870 should be pretty decent for today's testing. So I slapped in one of my own SSDs and we're going to test this thing. Now I'd love to make more videos just like this showing that older hardware is still completely usable today, and I think it's a really great budget alternative. So if you want to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments. Getting right into the testing, starting with my favorite game and my favorite benchmark, Rainbow Six Siege. At 1080p low settings, we see an average frame rate of 127 FPS, which is pretty good, and honestly was surprising to me to see such a high average FPS for a system this old. But it does kind of make sense because Rainbow Six Siege is a game that's almost as old as this computer, but not quite. I believe it's going on 9 years old now, which means that this game and this benchmark have had a lot of time to be optimized, and it's a pretty well-rounded test. If we look at the end screen though, we do see that our CPU usage sat almost at 90% utilization, which should give you an idea for what's to come in the next couple tests. Moving on to something a little bit more modern and a little bit more intense is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Running again at 1080p low settings, we get an average FPS of 42, but it spikes and it dips at various points, so this can be taken with a grain of salt. But we did get an average of 42 FPS overall. Being that this is a game that is a lot newer than the hardware, this is a pretty respectable outcome. Moving on to Grand Theft Auto 5, a benchmark that's not very well optimized at all, even though I believe that GTA is older than this machine, but I'll have to double check that. We see an average of around 80 FPS, but really the frame rate is all over the place, and once again we are very CPU bound, as you can see. So this benchmark, I still include it because I think it's nice to show people, but it doesn't really tell us a whole lot because the FPS spikes and it dips kind of all over the place. It's not very scientific, but I figured I'd include it in the benchmarks anyway. And lastly, I figured I should include this one because it's gaining a lot more popularity lately. This is Fortnite. Now, Fortnite, even today, isn't very well optimized. It really felt like it was better optimized in its early days, but I think this game is now also going on 7 or 8 years, if I'm not wrong. And the average FPS is somewhere around 100 frames per second, and that's on 1080p performance settings with epic view distance and everything else set to low. And once again, really, we're just CPU bottlenecked here. Now, while it looks a little bit glitchy and a little bit stuttery in the recording, that's partially because I'm using a really cheap capture card to not interfere with any of the performance coming from this machine. Part of that stuttering is due to the cheap capture card, and part of it is just that it is stuttering that much. Now, this is once again because we're CPU bound, whereas I really thought that we were going to be more bound by the single stick of DDR3. This was a pretty surprising outcome to me, but overall I'm pretty pleased with how this system performed, and I think that it's a pretty great example that you can still get pretty good hardware even if it is 10 years old, even older like this system. I think there's a lot of lower end hardware, or really a bunch of last generation hardware that's a lot cheaper now that I think people really aren't looking at, and maybe they should be looking into it. Personally, I'm a big fan of buying everything of the last generation, so I still have a Ryzen 7 3700X in my machine because I don't really need anything crazy or anything better than that because it's still a pretty good processor, and it can be found today for I think around $100, whereas when it was brand new it was closer to $300, maybe even $400 if I'm not wrong. If you'd like me to do more videos like this, let me know in the comments, because I've been looking to make videos like this where I go over and I review older hardware, but I want to make sure that there's an audience that would still appreciate content like this. Older components, older computers, older tech. Overall, let me know in the comments how this video turned out. I haven't uploaded a video in over 6 months at this point, so I'm kind of getting back into the groove of making videos, and I hope to make more content in the very, very near future. So if you like this video, leave the thumbs up. Please make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.